Hey, what's going on? Well, I'm here in the Oval Office and I wanted to do a vlog for you guys. I know I promised I would do more mobile DJ and wedding DJ related vlogs for you and kind of share some things with you, and that's exactly what I wanted to do today. First of all, I do want to say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you. We're exactly a week and 2 days away from Christmas as of the day that I'm recording this vlog. So again, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas to you, whatever you celebrate. We hope you're having a great holiday season. Now, I was chatting with some DJs on Facebook not too long ago, and I was sharing some of my stories over the last 20 years of being a mobile DJ. And you can imagine, being in this business 20 years, I've got a lot of them that I could share with you. Some amusing, some sad, some happy. I've seen a lot being a mobile DJ over the last 20 years. And some of the DJs suggested that I should do some videos talking about some of these stories because they got a lot out of them from reading them on Facebook. And I thought, you know what, that's a really good idea. So that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to share 3 stories with you that actually have a tie-in. And it's a lesson that I've learned over the last 20 years. And I'll just go ahead and tell you what the lesson is right now. The lesson is we don't change or do anything unless it comes directly from the bride and groom. Simple as that. That is one thing that I have learned over the last 20 years, and it's something real simple, to follow. Real easy. We don't change or do anything to the reception unless the bride and groom personally tell me that they want to make a change, and then we'll change it if they tell me. So yeah, that sounds pretty simple. Now, let me just kind of explain to you where I get to this conclusion of what I'm talking about. I got to give you some background on this, on how I normally do wedding receptions first, and then I'll give you these 3 short stories, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This will make sense for you here in just a second. But the way that I normally do things when it comes to a wedding reception is that I give the bride and groom the necessary forms that they need to fill out for their ceremony and their reception if they have me doing their ceremony as well. And those can be filled out online. And what happens is we'll have consultations. I'll talk it over with the bride and things like that. And we always make sure that we're doing what the bride wants us to do. But once she returns those forms and lets me know everything that she wants, like her wedding party introduction, spotlight dances, cake cutting, all the events that she wants, I'll type everything up on a written planner. It's typed up planner, and I'll send it out to, send it back to the bride and groom rather, and she'll have a chance to look it over, make sure that everything's the way that she wants it, and lets me know of any changes. Once she gives me her final approval that that planner is how she likes it, the sequence of events is how she likes it, and everything's laid out the way that she wants it, and we formatted the reception how she wants it, I'll then send that to her other vendors, like her photographer, her videographer, and caterer, or whoever she wants it sent out to. I'll make sure that I send that out to her other vendors and anybody else she wants to send out to. Then during the reception, we'll follow that sequence of events unless the bride tells me that she wants to make a change. So we stick to that sequence of events unless I hear it from the bride that she wants to make a change. Now notice I said as long as I hear it from the bride, not the bride's friend, not another vendor or anybody else. The bride personally has to tell me that she wants to make a change before I'll ever change anything. And like I said, pretty simple rule to follow there. So what happens if somebody comes up to me, like a friend of the bride's or somebody else or another vendor saying, hey, the bride wants to change this or that or do this or that or whatever. Well, no big deal. I'll just go and verify it with the bride before I actually change it. Simple enough. That's real simple, and that's how it normally works. And I've had other DJs, say, oh, I don't want to bother the bride on her wedding day, for something like that. But think about this for a second, okay? And this is going to tie into these stories I'm getting ready to tell you here in just a second. But would you rather, the bride, be mad at you later if you just did something without consulting with her and come to find out that she didn't want to make a change? Or would it be better to take 10 or 15 seconds to go ask the bride, hey, do you want to make a change? And, she can either say yes or no, and then that way you've got confirmation. That's just something to think about, and that's the way I've always looked at it. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the 3 short stories I want to share with you. Now, the first one comes from a wedding that I did at a luxury hotel near downtown Pensacola a few years ago. It's probably been about 10 years ago or more. I really can't remember. But we had done the ceremony inside this banquet room, and the reception was going to be held in the same room. And so basically after the ceremony, the wedding party and the bride and everybody else, they all moved outside to go have their pictures made while, they got everything moved out of the way on the dance floor, from the ceremony. They were putting the head table there and all that. Well, after they got the head table set up, I was sitting there at the DJ table while the wedding party was outside taking their photos. And the mother of the groom comes up to me. She says, okay, I just talked to the catering staff. They said the buffet's open, so you can get on the microphone and announce that it's open and everybody can start eating. I said, no, ma'am. I said, the way I've got this set up with the bride is that we're going to wait till they're done with pictures, and then we're going to do the wedding party introductions, and then the bride and groom are going to lead the buffet line. And she said, well, but these people are hungry, and they've had a long day, and the catering staff said that the buffet's open. You can go ahead and open it now. The bride won't mind. I said, well, I'm going to have to verify that with the bride. So anyway, I walked off and I walked outside. The bride was out there taking her pictures. I just pulled her off to the side, just asked her. I said, look, I said, the groom's mother came up to me and said that the buffet's open. I mean, we have this set up the way that you want it, with you and the groom leading the buffet line, followed by the wedding party. I mean, do you still want to do that? I'm not going to announce or do anything unless I verified it with you. The bride said, oh yeah, I want to keep it exactly the way it is. So, okay, fair enough. So I went back inside, and we waited until the bride and groom got finished with their photos and the wedding party. We did the wedding party introductions, and then I went ahead and let the bride and groom lead the buffet line like we normally do. Later on that evening, the bride came up to me after we got into open dancing, and she said, I'm sorry for the way my mother-in-law came up. She can be pushy at times, but I'm glad you did come up and verify with me before you announced anything like that. So there you go. That was a perfect example of why it was important for me to check with the bride. Now, another time was with the photographer. I was doing another wedding one time, and it was on a Friday. And come to find out, the photographer had driven about 3 hours to come to Pensacola to do this particular wedding. And he was going back that night. I think he traveled here with his wife or something like that. But anyway, he was going back late that night after the wedding was over with. And the reception was supposed to end about 10 p.m. that night. So he had probably gotten home about 1 o'clock in the morning at least. But anyway, I had typed everything up from the bride and groom. We'd already gone over everything, and then once she gave me her final approval, I sent out the planner and the sequence of events to her other vendors, including the photographer, so he had a copy of it. Well, I remember that I could kind of tell that he was going to be a little bit of an issue right in the very beginning, because after the ceremony and it was time to start the reception, he came up to me and said, okay, the bride and groom and the wedding party are ready to be announced. Go ahead and announce them. And I said, okay. I said, well, I'm going to go check. I'm going to go talk to the bride and groom in just a second. I got to make sure that everybody's lined up and all that stuff. And I'm going to give them some instructions on what to do. So anyway, I went and talked to the bride. We got everybody lined up. We went ahead and did the wedding party introductions the way that we wanted and all that good stuff. So anyway, he was just like kind of doing that all night, coming up to me saying, okay, it's time to do the cake cutting, announce it. And I'm like, well, I'm not announcing it until until the bride and groom, I verified it with them. But really, the thing that really came over that evening was, I guess it was probably about maybe 9:05, 9:10 that evening. We were into open dancing, well into open dancing. Everybody was having a good time, and the photographer came up to me and he said, okay, he said, we need to do the bride and groom's final dance right after the song's play it, right after the song's over with. I said, well, it's only 9:10. I said, we're not supposed to end it till 10. And he said, yeah. He said, but the bride wants to do the final dance after the song. I said, okay. I said, well, I'm gonna go check with her, then I'll make sure. And he said, but I've already checked with her. And I said, well, but I've got to check with her to make sure. We were to go till 10 unless I verify it with the bride. Well, I went up and talked to the bride. She was at the bar getting a drink, and I asked her, and she said, yes, I kind of think we want to end things a little early, but I don't want to end it after the next song. So I'm thinking maybe more like 9:45 or so. I said, okay, that's fine. We'll just do that then. So anyway, I went back to my table, and I started playing more requests because she had already made some requests that I hadn't played yet. The bride had actually come up to me about 10 minutes before the photographer did and requested songs, so she said she wanted to make sure that I played those songs before we ended the reception. So anyway, the bride and groom and everybody are out there dancing, having a good time. I guess it's probably about maybe 10 minutes later. The photographer comes up to me again, and he says, the groom or the bride's grandmother's getting ready to leave. We got to end this reception now. And I said, look, I just talked to the bride, and she said she wanted me to play her songs, and we're going to end it at about 9:45. We're going to end it about 15 minutes early, and that's what I'm going to do unless the bride tells me that she doesn't want to do that. Well, anyway, he got mad. He threw his arms up and walked off, so you could tell he wasn't happy with that at all. But anyway, we did go till about 9:50, and I think, or 9:45, 9:50, and we went ahead and did their final dance, did their send-off at that time. So really, the reception did end about 10 o'clock, but I could tell that photographer wasn't happy about that. So good. Again, another example there, I should say, of a situation where I'm glad that I listened to the bride and went and verified with her instead of just taking that photographer's word for it. Now, the last story I want to tell you about was a wedding that I did. I want to say it was in Fort Walton Beach years ago. And again, this is probably more than 10 years ago. But I was doing a wedding, and like I said, I type everything up on a planner, and I send it out to the bride and groom's other vendors once she's already verified it, make sure everything's the way it needs to be and all that. Well, when I got to the venue that day, it was in the afternoon. I was doing the ceremony and the reception. The ceremony was going to be held outside. The reception was going to be held inside. And I got there and found out that she had a day of coordinator that I had no idea was even existed. But anyway, this lady was pretty mean to everybody. She was walking around even yelling at her own husband. They were getting in arguments and everything else. I'm like, oh, goody, this woman sounds like she's going to be, a thrill to work with. But anyway, I didn't really, pay attention to her too much. I decided I'm just going to go on and do what we decided to do with the bride, and that's what we're going to do. So anyway, the ceremony, went great. I mean, she let me know when we were going to start the ceremony, and everybody was ready to go and all that stuff. So she was helpful when it came to that point. But once the ceremony was over with, and the bride and groom and everybody were taking their pictures, it was getting close for us to do the wedding party introductions. Well, the wedding coordinator, she was an older lady, and she came up to me and said, "Okay," she said, "I'm getting ready to line up the wedding party for the introductions here in just a minute. So can you give me the list?" I said, "Well, actually, ma'am, I'm getting ready to go back there and line them up." I said, "Usually, what I like to do is I like to, line them up, and I've got to make sure that they're lined up the way that they're supposed to be here on the planner, and then I'm going to give them some instructions on what to do when they get announced." And she said, "Well, can I see the lineup?" And I said, "Sure." So I let her see a copy of the lineup, and she said, "Well, what about the grandparents? They're not on here." And I said, "Well, the bride didn't mention anything about the grandparents. She didn't say anything she wanted about them being introduced or anything." And she said, "Well, I think we need to introduce them, so go ahead and write them in." I said, "Well, I'm getting ready to go back in the back in just a second and line the wedding party up, and when I see the bride and groom, I'm going to ask the bride if she wants her grandparents announced, and if she does, I'll write them in." And the wedding coordinator got mad and looked at me, and she said, "No, you're not." She said, "You're not going to bother the bride and groom. You're going to stay right here. I'm going to go get them lined up and everything, and you're not going to talk to her." I said, "Ma'am, I have an agreement with the bride that I don't change or do anything unless it comes straight from her. We follow this unless it comes straight from her. Excuse me." And I walked off, and I went and I talked to the bride in the back, and I asked her, and she said, "No, I want to leave it exactly the way it is." She said there was a reason why we didn't have our grandparents down there, because they're elderly, so they can't stand, and we just didn't think that they really wanted to be introduced, so we're going to leave it the way it is. I said, "Okay, good." And so I said that's all I needed to know. So anyway, I went ahead and lined the wedding party up, and we did the introductions. We got into the reception, and that wedding coordinator didn't say anything else to me the rest of the night. She never came back up to me or anything like that. And we did everything exactly the way the bride wanted the rest of the evening, and everything went smoothly. But, I kept thinking, I hope I don't have to work with this woman again. But during dinner, I happened to look her up on my phone, and come to find out she was from Maryland, I think it was. So she wasn't even from around here. Apparently, she was a friend of the bride. So I was thankful that I never had to work with her again. But then I started thinking about her poor husband. He had to go all the way back to Maryland with her. But yeah, she was really rude to everybody. And a lot of the people there, even the wait staff around that venue, were even talking about about her and how rude she was to everybody. So anyway, that's just another story there I wanted to share with you. Now let's take that first story that I told you, and let's think about that for a second, okay? Now what if I had gotten on the microphone and I had said that the buffet was open when the mother of the groom came up to me and told me she'd talked to the catering staff and it was open, everybody could start eating? Imagine what would have happened if that bride had come in and seen everybody there eating before we even did the wedding party introductions, after we had already arranged for us to do the wedding party introductions, and then her and the groom, have their moment to lead the buffet line. Can you imagine? I'd have had a pretty ticked off bride. That wouldn't have been a good situation. Same thing with the second situation with the photographer. Imagine if I had gotten on the microphone and announced that we were doing the final dance at like 9-10 p.m., 50 minutes before the reception was supposed to end, when I haven't even played some of the songs the bride had just requested 10 minutes earlier. I would have had a bride that was ticked off because we were ending the reception early. Or either she'd have come up to me and told me we're not ending it early or something like that. And to go on and do that, after I'd already announced it, that wouldn't have been good either. And then the third situation, you have to think about what would happen if I had just written the grandparents' names in without, checking with the wedding part, or excuse me, the bride and groom, and I went ahead and just announced the wedding party, and without checking to verify that they're all lined up correctly or giving them any instructions or anything like that. It could have been a bad situation. So that's why that's why that rule's in place. Always make sure that we check with the bride and groom before we announce or do anything or change anything, because that's the only way that we know 100% that we're doing exactly what our brides and grooms want us to do. And in the end, that's who we're working for. Remember that. So it's the bride and groom that you're working for, and you want to do everything you can to make them happy. Alrighty, so that's where we're going to leave this. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to reach out to me privately, you certainly can. I got my information right there on the screen. You can text me, email me, call me, whatever works out best for you. I'll be glad to talk to you. If you have a suggestion for a future video, if you like my suggestions or opinions on something, just feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to do that. So until next time, practice and enjoy.